Hello and welcome to, oh my gosh, how about that, Chris? Totally goofed it up. Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. I'm Mike Casaza. This is a Paramount podcast. That is Chris Anderson. He is going to do much better than I am this morning as I have missed up the most elementary part of this podcast. It all goes downhill from here, Chris. But like the season, there's a lot left to answer before we are done here. Questions and answers, subscribers submit. I guess we submit because we give the answers, and some of these we don't want to, but we have to. We are democratic. People vote on the ones they want answered. We go to the most popular choices, and we have some doozies in there today, Chris. But before we go anywhere, we did not catch up after the game Saturday. You had, I believe you said, awkward dancing at a wedding. I had work, Nippert Stadium, a lot going on, plate spinning. What do we think of what happened there as West Virginia wins a game it could not lose and maybe could have lost if not for a couple plays by a defense that has been under attack all season?
Plate spinning, you mean Skyline Chili?
Never.
Appreciated the member on our board who blatantly pointed out that you were just eating chili while I was working. That was fantastic.
Lies.
Um, I that game was whatever. Like I had a hard time trying to articulate what exactly happened in that game. It did feel like Cincinnati, especially Brandon Sorsby, kind of gifted it to West Virginia. I mean, he made some really poor decisions. Those were some really bad turnovers, but West Virginia, I mean, they kind of made it like you're not, what is that old quote? I think it's a Larry Bird quote. Luck doesn't go around looking for a stumble bum or something like that. Like you create kind of like, hey, you create your own luck. And I think West Virginia created their own luck there. Yeah. Like Sorsby was bad, but West Virginia was in the right positions. West Virginia was creating that pressure. Like Sorsby made a bad decision because West Virginia put pressure on him. Sorsby fumbled that one ball because West Virginia put pressure on him. So I think it's a positive. I said I'd have to go back and review the film to see how different the defense was. Um, yeah, sure. I mean, it did look a little more aggressive, but again, you're not getting an overhaul of the scheme here, but it was more aggressive. West Virginia created the havoc, and the results came.
Personality just seemed different, and it took that pick six. And once they did that, everybody woke up, and maybe they were asked to do the same things before that pick six afterward, but they did it faster. They did it more conclusively, I guess. They got to spots in a hurry. They hit pretty hard. They were kind of came out of their off their feet sometimes, missed some tackles. Those are good players in Cincinnati with the ball, so that'll happen. Like Swordsby Slippery, Kiner again, one of the top missed tackle guys in the country. It's going to happen, but save that 180-yard touchdown, which does happen. Really, nothing bad happened in the defense, and did more good than bad. Great play. Just get their explosive guy wheeling out of the backfield, send everything to the right. He goes to the left. They could have maybe tackled him or defended it better, but listen, that defense is still that defense, and Pryor is really, really electric. That's his fourth touchdown at 55 or more yards this year. So you put those two things together, that might happen. That might happen. I mean, that could have been, a much bigger deal or a much more frequent occurrence, but it didn't. And yeah, having gone back and flicked through the game a couple times, I don't, I don't know what was new as far as play calls. Who knows? There were some new ideas. Like, I mean, setting defensive backs is a new thing. And you could tell that the way that they line up their receivers on one side of the field, that just kind of gave either the spear or the corner an invitation to come in from the open side. Why wouldn't you? And if Sorsby isn't going to keep it and bootleg around that way, then you're not going to pay for your mistake. But that never happened. So that was a good adjustment. And then just kind of, darting their middle linebackers around the A gap and making things difficult for the center, but also keeping those guys there against the run or dropping back. That was new. But yeah, apart from that, not a whole lot. But the big difference is they got 3 turnovers, Chris. They got 6 all year before that. They had 14 points off turnovers in 8 games. Incredible. It's 17 Saturday. So did they press the turnover button a lot? I doubt it, right? But some good things happened, and and to well actually some of the turnover stuff. Sorsby has to put that ball in play on fourth down. That's the fourth down pass in the pick six. He has to put it in play. Just made a terrible decision. So they take advantage of that, and the fumble, you're right, just hit him in the right spot and it goes. And then the backward pass fumble, you hit the quarterback and you make him go in a different direction. That helps. So tip of the hat, had to happen, did happen, and all things considered, the people who who make decisions kind of want to see something happen that's conclusive. I don't know, man. I say this a bunch, but like that's neither an A and neither an F, right? So now they go 3 more games and try to get a beat on this. And man, if there isn't a whole lot to play for in these final 3 games. I think people are starting to figure that out now. Like it's becoming real. Like they don't have to do a whole lot apart from win 3 games, and they have to get not a whole lot of help. Like a lot of these teams are going to lose because they play each other. So it becomes very interesting in November. The more you play, the more you win.
Makes a believer. There it is.
I'm a realist. That's all. I just count the votes, Chris.
Well, speaking of counting the votes, you ready to get into the mailbag now?
Let's go.
Again, you guys asked the questions. We set up the thread on the message board, and then you guys also vote on them. The most upvoted questions are the ones that get answered, and we are going in order, most upvoted and downward. Although I'm going to combine two of them here because it seems to be related.
Mm-hmm.
The first one and most upvoted comes from Kuzapalooza. Any thoughts about Shadon Brown's tweet to a reporter and what it says about him and the staff? Related question, not quite as upvoted because I think it was a little more not as pointed, I suppose, a little more diplomatic. Says the coaches seem to have adopted an us versus them mentality recently. Is it somewhat expected, warranted with the scrutiny they've faced, online attacks, billboards, etc.? Does that attitude ever work for coaching staffs? Any examples you can remember? And is there a way to repair the divide with this staff other than an 8-9 win season? All right.
Hmm.
It's all kind of related, but there were several parts in there. That last one I want to separate out any way to repair the divide, but because that seems like a different thing here. But is there an us versus them mentality that you're sensing from this coaching staff right now?
Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but isn't the West Virginia media really soft and doesn't ask hard questions? Who are they? Who is besieging these coaches? Beats me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause they don't read what you write either.
Nope.
So I don't know how that would be a thing. I do think that sometimes you kind of you create like totems for things that you want to have represent your struggle, and all of a sudden, if you can put a bad headline, oh no, they picked against us, stuff like that. If you can put it out in front of your team, it does motivate and inspire. I'm not sure what level of college that is. Is it 100 level or 400 level, or is it middle school even about how to inspire teams that are 4-4 and are trying to play for their coach's job, whether it's their position coach or their head coach? You'd think that you'd be a little bit more advanced than that, but if that's what it takes, cool, good for you. I don't know what the tweet in question is, Chris. Leave it at
Why not?
that. I
Why
don't. I
not?
don't know. Couldn't tell you. Um, from what I've been told, um, those two are pretty close from what I believe, right? They hang out in recruiting stuff, so possible it was just good natured. Who knows? I think that the bummer is that some people are born on third base is kind of the idea, right? You hear that a bunch. And some people stand on home and think that they score, but they're just turning in the lineup cards too. It's a tricky thing to have a game like that in a season like that, in a tenure like that, and to really kind of celebrate. And I can see how that turns off a lot of people who have watched the product for so long. Um, but again, it could also just be two guys who were on pretty good terms and they can rib each other too. I wouldn't put a whole lot into it on a one-off thing, but if that is some sort of like mascot for turning the season around too, um, cool, good for them.
I mean, this kind of mentality, this kind of chip on your shoulder stuff, even to the point of creating it in your own mind at times. Um, that's a thing that athletes do, and
Oh yeah,
athletes and coaches and athletes that turn into coaches. This is what they do. They find a thing to rally around. They find a thing to kind of motivate themselves. And if you are a coach on this coaching staff, especially somebody like Shadon Brown, who is in charge of the secondary and the pass defense ranks 100 and whatever all the numbers are that's been going out 133rd out of 134 teams, et cetera,
it
et
was
cetera.
last in the country, Chris.
Yeah. When your pass defense is ranked the last in the country, you're going to be taking a lot of strays from commentary that's made, from fans, et cetera, et cetera. So you're backed into a corner, and if you're going to back into a corner, you're going to try to rally around something. So doing the us against them, us against the world. Hey, it's just only us here in the trenches, only us here in this room. We're the only ones that matter. and we're out to prove everybody wrong. That's what you're supposed to do as a coach. Um, the again, was it just jovial ribbing? Possibly. Um, if it's not, I don't like the look of it, like publicly, like putting that out there on social media, just to again, as you kind of said, like pass defense is 134th out of 134th coming into this week. So nah, I don't know.
What are the
It
comments on that tweet, Chris?
I don't know either for the same reason you don't know.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I feel, I mean, the reporter is one thing too. I mean, for Keenan, like if a whole bunch of people ganged up on him for, man, look at you, you got dunked on, it makes him feel bad. I feel bad for him, but like also like who cares for one?
Yeah.
But also, if there is no response, if people aren't like that, then what have you really accomplished? I don't know. It just seems like, man, there's bigger fish to fry than a prediction from a reporter before a game too. But that's Twitter, man. Like there are times that coaches found you in the hallways. I could tell you some stories about being confronted by coaches with ice cream cones because they were that mad. They came out of their cafeteria in their lunch break to come and find me because of something I wrote too. But that's part of it, man. Like if you write something, you're gonna get some of that stuff too. And if you're scared about it, you probably shouldn't do it. So that's um Twitter's Twitter's very 2024,
It
Chris.
it's gonna happen. It doesn't even have to be Twitter.
Sure.
See, I've told the story on the board, and I don't know if I've told it on the podcast before, but this was the 2012 season when West Virginia was, started out amazing, and then things went off the rails, and it was the Kansas State game at home, right? They also got blown out in that one too,
Yeah.
correct? But it was also a big visit weekend for kids, and I just collected quotes from recruits, put them together in a story after the game that here's what every recruit said. And some recruit said something along the lines of, other than the score, it was a great visit. Something totally whatever like that. Finished it up, went to bed, phone call from 304 area code that I didn't have in my phone at 1:30 in the morning, 2 in the morning. Like, I'm sleeping. No way.
Oh.
Second phone call. Huh. I don't know who this is, but I'm still not answering it. Ignore it again. Third time in a row within 5 minutes. Now I'm getting concerned because then I'm like, wait a second. My whole family is from West Virginia. Is somebody dead? Like, is something terrible happened in my family? I better answer it. Because again, I didn't think I'd written anything outlandish. It was literally just, here are the quotes. Here's a list. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, after 3 phone calls, I was ripped by an assistant coach from West Virginia for about 20 minutes. Not for anything I said, but for posting a quote from a recruit about the visit that was middling at best. So it's not never been seen before. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
Yep.
It's going to happen.
It happens a bunch too. I promise you it's happened this season too, but it's happened very quietly and not on Twitter. But again, that's just the way. And again, if it's just two people joking around with each other, that's fine. That's probably something for them to decide. But man, there are different ways to do things.
Let's get to that last part of that question because I think that's a good thing to think on here.
I
And
don't know how
it's
to answer this one, Chris, because I don't know that 8 or 9 wins is going to do it. I just don't know. I
right.
mean, yeah, people will be happy that they got in, but here's the deal: like if they end up with 9 wins, actually they can't. They can end up with 8 wins if
No,
they
not
go to
get a
if
bowl game.
well, no,
Championship.
that's
You
what I'm
could
saying.
get
I'm saying
10,
regular.
Mike.
I'm saying
10,
regular.
11, 12.
If they end up
National
with eight,
championship.
they end up with 8 in the regular season. They could end up in the conference championship game. Been saying this for weeks, and all of a sudden, Chris, this time that we wasted on previous podcasts by saying, listen, just keep an eye over this because it's inevitable what's going to happen if West Virginia keeps winning. That's just, yeah, it had to happen. Teams are going to beat each other that were above them. And West Virginia was going to cross teams off on the same list if West Virginia won. So here we are. That would be a game changer if they go to the Big 12 championship game. I don't know how you could argue that. If they go 7-2 and they go to the Big 12 championship game, that's a pretty successful season. And if they mess around and win, wow. Now you're probably, I don't know. That's a great question. I think in the playoff, that's way down the road, but Boy, that'd be crazy.
Oh, they're in the playoff, but somebody asked this the other day. They're not a bye. Like, if West Virginia wins the Big 12 championship, and then they're going to be what, on the road, like in Boise or something?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, no, yeah, the Big 12 champs in, but like if they are
Yeah.
they if they let's say if they get there, I'm just saying it's so pie in the sky. If they're in the Big 12 championship game, if they're in the playoff right now, I don't even want to think about that. But I'm not sure that anything short of that is gonna make people happy. If they win out and they do everything they're supposed to do, but they don't get to Dallas in the Big 12 championship game, I don't know that that's going to be good enough for a lot of people because this happened last year. And look, if they don't get to Dallas and they go 8-4, it's because they didn't beat the two best teams in the conference. They didn't play them again. That was the story last year. And I don't know where Cincinnati's going to end up. I know where they're at. I don't know where Baylor's going to end up. I know where they're at. Same as UCF, same as Texas Tech. It's not a great list of opponents, but that's the list in the Big 12. That's the gist of this. This is why in 2022 they looked ahead and they said, "Wow, no Texas and no Oklahoma. Why start over? Let's hit 25, 24, 25, 26. Let's hit this new era with momentum and maybe get to the title game once or twice and maybe win it once or twice and resurrect this program." And that plan, however foolhardy it might have been and however foolproof it may yet be, um, it's on track. I just don't know that people are going to like that very much. Like 8-4 and getting to the Big 12 championship game should be a good season. I don't know that everybody would agree with that.
Next question. Always next year. I think he was
What
the
a
one that
name.
asked the last question too. Yeah, he's two in a row. Um, what's the deal? There's again that we're going in order of most upvoted. What's the deal with Justin Robinson? Produces almost every time he's been given the opportunities, but the opportunities are few and far between. Is this another instance of Brown being married to practice results and refusing to believe in quote unquote gamers? Maybe he's just not built for two spotting. Mike,
Wow, that's a
should
good one.
Justin Robinson, yeah, a little jab in there too. Should
Listen, he
Justin Robinson see the field more?
didn't have spring football because he transferred, showed up just a little bit behind. I don't want to say out of shape because he's probably in better shape than a vast majority of us too. But there's football shape, there's conditioning, and to get through practice, to get to preseason practice, you have to go through a physical gauntlet at West Virginia, and then that means you hit the ground speeding, so you can handle camp. He didn't have that, so it took him a while, and he was just kind of catching up, catching up. But when he was there, like I watched him in those red zone drills, which don't require a lot of stamina, but he was there with, those big bodies trying to pluck balls out of the sky. So he did some stuff, but could he go out and scrimmage all the time? Could he go as long or as far as like a Preston Fox or a Hudson Clement or a Traylon Ray did? No, of course not, right? And he's still learning the offense. And then he missed some time, Chris. He was injured during the season. So he's been back for a couple of weeks now. He's gotten good practice reps. Preston Fox hasn't been able to practice and play consistently for a while, and it levels up. So what he has and what he can do is starting to show, and better late than never, I would say. But some of that stuff was working against him, and if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. Like if you're not ready for practices, which again is not necessarily his fault, if you're getting used to a team and a playbook, yeah, man, you're going to trail a little bit. And then if you're not practicing and not playing, how are you going to get in the field? It's going to take you time you're going to have to catch up twice, and he's maybe doing that right now. It's a good sign though.
So I was looking at his snap counts. He actually played fewer snaps in this game than he did in the season opener
Yeah.
against Penn State. Um, that's not entirely fair because again, the offense only played 43 snaps
Mhm.
on Saturday. So 19 out of 43 compared to 22 out of 71 for week one. So he's playing a higher percentage of the snaps lately than he was earlier in the season, but it still feels like should be getting on the field more. I get that there's a rotation at wide receiver. I get that you have a few guys that you trust and you feel like can get the job done, but his production and how he brings something different. There is nobody else in this receiving core like him. Not even close. Like Traylon Ray, Hudson Clement, Preston, like some of those guys, like they are not repetitive of each other necessarily. Maybe a little bit of crossover there, but there's also guys behind them that are pretty similar to them. There's nothing like Justin Robinson on this roster. So getting him out there and trying to utilize him more seems like an absolute no doubter. And it feels like it's something we've been talking about for a while. Cause I think it was week 3 where you and I were talking, and it was a combo question of Robinson and Bray versus maybe Clement and Fox. I think maybe that was the two versus two here. And I don't want to speak for you here, but I think you might have been with me on this. Um, Said, hey, I think this is maybe the week that the snaps flip. Like this is where Robinson and Bray start playing more snaps than the guys in front of them. It's too obvious. Needs to start flipping. And it just didn't. It just hasn't. It's just kind of stayed steady. And with that kind of production, with what he's doing, I mean, I think it was like 13 targets, 10 catches, 3 touchdowns. Like,
Do it.
do it. Throw it
Or
to
in
him.
the
Get him out there.
yeah.
Come on.
Hey, 43 snaps, lowest in the Brown era. I think Dana had one game with fewer than that, and it was an Iowa State game where they just got suffocated. And then I bet you never under Stewart and Rodriguez. And I honestly, I wonder even under Nealon, because the game was so different back then with the clock being stopped and just being generally slower. They weren't playing fast, but the games were longer. I wonder if are we talking late 70s, something like that, since the last time there was a game with fewer than 43 snaps. It's a crazy number.
Next question. Pats fan 1993. Why do we keep trying? There were several people kind of hitting on this, but this is the one that was upvoted. Why do we keep trying to force the ball to Rodney when he's not doing anything to warrant the effort beyond his potential?
I don't know. He's their slot receiver right now. So it's him or Farmer. So it's him. And then why does he get that ball in the end zone? Don't know. It's a read, I suppose. They've run that play for ages, Chris. That like slot fade, that slot kind of corner post. They've done that for a long time, back to like, the Winston Wright days of the offense. So it's in the playbook. It's something they do. I would imagine thought they had a good chance there. Brown said that he needed to run his route more to the north, like to the back of the end zone there. So I don't know if the throw was perfect or if the route was bad, but they kind of ended up in the short corner. And if that ball is incomplete, who cares? The quarterback makes an incredible play. I just think people forget that. So put that on Gallagher and Markio, sure. But man, to not be watching the play and maybe he turned back in the last second, but to tip the ball and somehow catch it, sometimes you just go, okay, fine, okay, you're gonna do that, okay. I don't put a lot into that. They just haven't found ways to use him for 2 seasons now. Like they're trying the jet sweeps, they're trying the screens, but they they just haven't had it yet. I'm not sure what a great vertical threat he is. So much of his stuff goes sideways that perhaps you catch him off guard when you go vertical with him, and that's the idea there. Here, I'm going to run my route outside because I always go left to right. Whoop, now I'm going north, and maybe you catch the cornerback sleeping. Perhaps that's the plan there. Um, it's a good talent. It's a nice piece to have. You got to figure out how to use it, and then at some point he's got to figure out how to make the plays when he does get a jet sweep and he does get a bubble screen. Instead of that being once a half or once a game, have you done once a quarter, once a drive? He's gonna have to make some things happen for sure. Why did they get
I'm
it to him? Because he's a talent. He absolutely is a talent. Just hasn't really shined yet like they thought.
right. I think the fact that that ended up being such a key-ish play, or not even ish, just key play,
Oh yeah.
it shined the spotlight on, oh, Gallagher's out there. He's getting targeted like twice a game. It's just not something that I know it's a big message board talking point. Hey, what's Gallagher doing here? Not West Virginia, but why is he so much part of this offense and hasn't done much yet? He's getting targeted twice a game. Like they're trying. Like he's a talented guy. They're just every once, like you said, I think you said once a half. That's basically what it is. Once and a half, they give him a little toss, see what happens. That one, something different, but goes back to your point just a minute ago of, hey, he's the slot guy and the only slot guy right now. Rick Darius Farmer is,
Two
I,
snaps.
yeah, like we're just not going to see him much. And there aren't any other options right now unless they change the entire dynamic of what that slot receiver position is, which you're not going to do 11 weeks into the season. So
By the
it
way,
is what it is at this point. Hmm?
43 snaps. They had 40 against Iowa State in 2018, and then 1977 was the last time they had fewer than 43 snaps. So that's a generational snap count right there.
That is wild.
Mhm.
That is absolutely wild. Um, Next question, next most upvoted question comes from KY's 93. What is the role and responsibility of the football general manager as far as these transfers who have not panned out? Is he evaluating talent poorly, or are the coaches not using talent effectively? Are his choices listened to or ignored?
I mean, you have the GM because he understands college scouting. He's been on the other side and he said, okay, this is what the NFL looks for. The NFL are generally your best college players and the best players and the best teams. That's a broad stroke. I understand that, but if you're an NFL scout, you're dealing with that. So when you put that guy in a college office and you say, all right, the portal is your player eligibility list for the draft, so to speak. Who are we taking? Um, you kind of start from there. So that's Drew Fabianich. This is his second season, I believe. Is that right? Um, done a lot of interviews, explain his process a lot. Go back, you can catch it and see what he does. He's by all accounts in charge of a lot of it, just evaluation, and that includes the NIL stuff too, with people who are coming in or who are on the roster. I want X. Well, and just like a general manager, we can't offer you that. What we think is that you're worth this much, and if it's not to the player, then it's to the coach. If the coach says, "I want to get this guy, what can we pay him?" Well, he's probably worth this much. We could do this, but he's probably worth this much. So it very much is like general manager. I think that some people kind of like cringe at the idea of general manager. Truth is, Brown's the general manager. He's got the stamp on everything. Does he, defer to some people? You would think so if he has a general manager. So what blame does he get, Chris? I don't know, man. Like this conversation that we're having about Robinson, Bray has been hurt, but was he lighting people on fire? No. And then, who have been the good transfers? TJ Jackson would be one. I think you have to give, credit for Fatorma Moba, the way he's played this season. It's not just a 1 year thing. I think West Virginia looks for like guys with 2 or more years because it does take a while. We heard the old defensive coordinator say that a bunch. So don't sell all the stock yet. So there has to be an evaluation conversation at the end of the year. And I think if you sat Neil Brown down, if we paid Neil Brown to come on the podcast, right? He's probably not coming for free. We talked to him about this. I bet you he'd say the talent evaluation in the secondary has to be better. Whether it's high school players, whether it's transfers, it just has to get better. There's something there that's not right. Defensive line, successes. Linebacker, I'm not sure how hard they went after the linebackers this year because they really liked who they had, but Carrico's a good enough addition for what they needed, right? Offensive line, like, are you out on Xavier Bowsley, or you got a couple years for him? You would take Justin Robinson if you need a tall receiver late in the game, like they did. Braid, they kind of rushed to get, but they liked him. They liked him as an opponent, and they thought he could do some things. Just there are successes there, but just remember too, you're recruiting to a tenuous head coaching situation. You don't have a ton of NIL money. We've been over this before, like not great NIL, like bottom quarter of the Big 12. So you have to get quantity of players while getting quality. So you can't go out and spend everything at once. And that's the other part about this too. It's not a salary cap, but it kind of is a salary cap because you have only so much NIL money. Hey man, we can get this great corner. That's fine, but we need two corners and a safety. You kind of have to factor that into, and then people don't want to admit that, but that is part of the calculus here.
All right. Now I know PFF is not the end all be all. I get it, but
What?
over the course of an entire season, it tends to even itself out and be a little more consistent. Right now, there are 8 players on West Virginia's defense that have rated out for the season above average, that have played at least 100 snaps, not guys that have played like 10 snaps or whatever. TJ Jackson, transfer from the
Keep
last
him.
2 years. Fatorma Moba, transfer from this is my Drew Fabianich defense right here. Reed Carrico, transfer. Byron Bradley, transfer.
Oh yeah,
Josiah Trotter, a recruit under the general manager, but that one, goes to the coaches.
Jeff
That one
Coons.
goes to Trey Nair, but you know, so within the last couple years. Ty French, transfer. Dantes Fagan,
Are you serious?
transfer.
French is in there.
KK Farnu. 7 of the 8 players that are quote unquote above average on the defense for West Virginia are transfers from the last 2 seasons. So yes, there are misses. There have been some bad misses. There have been guys that they thought were great that they just were like these guys are in, implanted them as starters, and it just hasn't worked out as well. But I don't think, and I'm not saying you've said this. I don't even think the question says this, but I don't think it's been a complete failure
No.
on the transfer portal. I mean, again, you certainly didn't say it. I don't think the question said it, but just to put in a little defense of West Virginia's DM and what the defense has brought in right now.
Mhm.
Let's see. Next question. JAL1234.
Joe.
Seems almost everyone thinks the offense was poor against Cincinnati, but why was it bad? Poor execution, poor play calling, Cincinnati defense better than expected. Mike,
No.
now you got the post game press conference. As I was getting ready to prep for the post game solo pod while you were eating your chili, Neil Brown was walking off and Jed Drenning, got to talk to him on the radio for 20, 30 seconds. And he was disgusted with the offense and said that the offense, and I'm quoting, I believe ish, quoting here. I don't know if that's a technical journalism term, but that the offense had basically done everything but lose the game for them. That it was that bad. He seemed genuinely disgusted with what it was. Did that continue during the post game press conference? And what's your take?
Yeah, he said it was as bad as it's been in 2 years, and it'd be hard to argue that. There wasn't a whole lot of explanation though. I think one thing is that when you don't have the ball, you cannot get into a rhythm, and you can have drive starters, but like if it doesn't work, oh, and you could have momentum plays, and if it doesn't work, oh, they just never had momentum. I mean, I don't remember anything really threatening going on that was making you say now they got it. So a couple of things. One, Corleone is a monster. Like he just makes life difficult. That guy is just he moves people around. He makes plays. He's very good. That was one thing that I don't know what he graded out as. I haven't seen that. I didn't pay attention to that. I don't know how many tackles he had. I just know that like there was two guys on him for most of the game, and then there were three times sometimes because you got to get him out of the way, and he doesn't want that. That was just an observation for me is that their middle was difficult, and then if West Virginia can't run inside zone or do power stuff, that's going to be hard. Some of the plays were just bizarre, some like running power on like 3rd and 4 with your quarterback is tricky. Really throwing outside screens to your tight end. You're asking him to break some tackles against again a defense that's not great, that isn't good in the red zone. But that drive kind of died. That was their field goal drive in the red zone. Just some things that just didn't seem good. Just a lot of sideways stuff. A lot of just trying to create something later in the possession or later in the game that just didn't pay off. It just seemed like when they had something good, it was aggressive and it was 3rd and long. So maybe they had no choice. I wonder if they were aggressive as they wanted to be. And now you can say, no, they were conservative. They played behind the sticks. Here you go, Mike. You're talking about sideways plays and, conservative calls. And the big plays were 38 and 50-yard pass plays. You can't do that all game. I get that. But that's misleading too. It just seemed like that they kind of got caught in between things. And then all of a sudden, what they were doing was working. And that's the danger, Chris. That scoreboard said that their plan was fine, and the scoreboard lied, right? And all of a sudden, you throw that interception in the end zone where it could have been 31-7, and now your offense is not going to rescue you because you've got nothing going. Why did it happen? I don't know. Was it poorly executed? Was it poorly conceived? Probably a little bit of each. Was it poorly called? Probably that as well. So it's never just one thing. I just don't think Cincinnati's defense is that dynamic and makes plays, with one exception. Their man-to-man gave West Virginia trouble. And Hudson Clement's really good at getting open. Like if you look at his numbers even last year and then this year, like his yards after catch, his yards per route run are pretty good because he gets open. Didn't have that. Preston Fox is not a guy who's going to do that. And that's the replacement. Didn't get a ton of snaps, period. Never mind for like a Justin Robinson. Just that the man-to-man worked. And that's kind of concerning because that's one thing that West Virginia has said. Hey, I hope they jam us. I hope they man us. Let's see what happened. The times it didn't work, West Virginia went deep and hit big plays. So why wasn't the man ineffective underneath? It wasn't all game, but a lot of the game, you could just tell Markio had a hard time finding openings against man-to-man defense. And was that the coverage? Was that Corleone coming after him or anybody else in the pass rush? Maybe, but just a really strange time to have a strangely out of character performance.
I was looking at it. 5 3-and-outs,
Yeah.
interception, turnover on downs, kneel down. Just not no zero drives. Well, no, first drive was 8 plays, but most of these drives are. We talked about it before, where previous games when West Virginia was quote unquote having success on offense, it was a 12 play, 60 some yard drive that took off 6 minutes off the clock. West Virginia didn't have a single drive that went 4 minutes. It
Yeah.
was it was a lot of short drives, a lot of three and outs, a lot of turning it back over. And I'm sitting here I was looking at the snaps while you were talking there, trying to figure out because to your point, with no Hudson Clement, although I could have swore Chris Myers told me that Hudson Clement was on the field.
Ah,
Um,
too
it was a
bad.
rough day for him. Rough day.
Day.
Uh, it is. So your typical lineup for the vast majority of the snaps for West Virginia. You got your five offensive linemen, your quarterback, Traylon Ray, Cole Taylor, Rodney Gallagher, and a running back.
They played 5 subs.
Yeah,
They
not
had
a lot of
16
guys getting
players
on
on
the floor,
offense.
getting on the field there.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've never seen that
Just,
number before. 16.
just not very. It's just not an. Yeah, I just keep thinking about some of our comments in past years of why are there so many contested catches? Because they can't get separation.
Here,
And
here are your subs for the game. CJ Donaldson,
mhm,
Traylon Ray, Jack Samarco. So that's not explosive, right? Not sorry, Traylon Davis, not Traylon Ray.
yeah,
So a running back, two tight ends, and then two receivers. That would have been Robinson and
Rick
Farmer.
Darius Farmer for two
Yeah.
snaps.
That's all the reserves they had. Again, 16 players in offense, 43 snaps. I get that, but um, I'm not even sure that changes. If they played 21 guys, they're going to be better. I don't know about that. Just hard to get momentum when you're constantly pressing because you're not getting the ball and you're winning too. That's the other part about it. You're winning. You want to be careful not to screw it up. That is a rock and a hard place, and that's not been his specialty as a play caller. When he's up front, you've documented this before. Things go weird sometimes.
Would you like to guess how many contested catches West Virginia had on Saturday?
I'm going to say zero, but how many targets were there?
Zero. Only not many, but only zero contested catches,
How many
according to
targets?
PFF.
Only 15
Says only
throws.
one. Says
Yeah,
only one.
that doesn't surprise me because like he was off, and I just think that he was not pulling the trigger on some of the things and waiting, and he got sacked twice on one drive, I think, right? Yeah, just it's a bad time for him to do that because the quarterback job is certainly up in the air.
All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
Who do you start? Garrett Green, Nico Marchio, and we have multiple people. I don't want to admonish these people, but I might suggesting a dual quarterback system. The answer is no, and that
Can't.
don't do it. They've tried
So
it
much,
before; it doesn't work.
so much time goes into arranging that, Chris. Like that's a big chunk of your practice if you're going to figure out when to get him in, two different scripts. Like that's not something you want to do when you could just give that time to get in the rust off your starter. I don't think that Brown is going to put Markio back out there if he watched that game and said, that's the quarterback. Like that pass is open. Like he was really focused on that first fourth down on the first drive. And if the throw's in the money, that drive goes on. And of course, we probably score. Okay. And you know what? They're on the plus side of the field. Maybe he's right. At least kick field goal, right? So that's points off the board there. And that's like a no-no, I think. And you've just seen a bad defense in Arizona, not a very good defense against Cincinnati. Chris, do you happen to know what happened when West Virginia played Baylor last year?
Mm.
Who the quarterback was? You want to look that up? I just wonder if there's something about familiarity right now for Brown. Like, I think he's put together two games over 3 weeks, him and Chad Scott and the brain trust for Markio. And, like, you know what? You got 2 wins, but thanks. We got to put our guy back who can make some plays, who can run around, who's going to see it because he's been back there more, who isn't afraid to throw it. Green's not afraid to throw it. Like, he'll put way too much pepper on it sometimes, and he'll go deep rather than check it down, but he's not reined in and not reckless, not fearless either, but like he'll do some things that I think we're missing. And that I just think it was a step back, and that's a sign right now. And if the devil so to speak, with Green, Can you get him back there and really pour it into him this week? So I think if Brown looks back and says that's the quarterback, it wasn't offensive line, it wasn't receivers, and by all indications, Chris, a lot of this is the quarterback against a not a very good defense. Well, Baylor's defense is better. It's probably schemed better. It's crafted by a great coach, so that would worry me a little bit. And if the quarterback has seen it before, I think that's an easy thing to get back in. The question is, though, Chris, how much physically can Green do? I don't know. That is a big part. We'll get some sort of an answer about that. But if he's not able to kind of shake this off and practice a couple days in a row, it's going to be Nicco. It's going to be one or the other. It won't be both. I think it's way too complicated when you don't have to be complicated. There's a difference between one or the other. It's not like they're so close. Like what I mean by that is there's a difference in making just putting one in because this guy's healthy and he's back, or this guy's not healthy and we can stick with this guy for a third straight start. That's a difference. Like there's no reason to go with both. Like you could explain one and justify one or the other. It's kind of ridiculous, I think, to implement, not to suggest, to implement playing both quarterbacks. Very complex.
Um, to answer your question, you already knew the answer. I mean, I knew Garrett Green started against Baylor, but
Yeah.
that was you. I think you were bringing it up because it was maybe his best game, one of his best games, certainly. Completed 2/3 of his passes, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and ran for over 100 with 2 more scores. So
Compelling.
yeah, I think I
Barely
said on the
won
post.
though against a bad team.
Yeah, I think I said on the post game pod. If you had asked me like leading into the game, I would have thought that it was Markio the rest of the way, but just again that 30-second sound bite from Neil Brown and his just disgust for the offense maybe felt like he was laying the groundwork for all right, when Green's healthy, we're switching back because that offense was so bad. He was so disgusted by it that he was ready to make a change back to what he had going before. And so, yeah, if Green's healthy, I'm with you. I am now on board with a flip back to Green for this week's game against Baylor.
Quarterback run game disappeared too. It's just
Yeah.
easier to guard them when you don't have to worry about the quarterback running.
All right, Mike, you get time for one more question.
Yeah. I did not have the chili. Leave me alone. It looks gross. I don't want it. And I'm from Hamilton. I just don't want it.
Oh,
That's not it?
is it? No, no, that's not it. And I don't like it either. Like I didn't want to say it before, before the game, so the Cincinnati people didn't get good on you too hard and on our site too hard, but not a fan of it. Not a fan of it at all.
Mm.
Um, next question. All right, we got a tie. You want to talk defense or you want to talk freshman? You pick. I'll give you that hint.
Let's go freshman. We already did a
Okay.
little bit of defense.
WV Nomad 7. Usually at this point in the season, you start to see the number of snaps for underclassmen increase, especially freshmen. However, it seems to me that outside of Nate Gabriel, it appears to be doing the opposite. I thought Zay Jennings would have more of a presence by now, and same with Rick Darius Farmer. How does this compare to prior years?
Not great, right?
Yeah.
uh, so one of the things that was different on the defense, Chris, is that they didn't play a lot of younger players. They didn't sub safeties. I think their two deep guys played the entire game. I think Boyce got on the field for a couple. Jennings was on the field early and then didn't play again because things did not go well. They Gabriel's a nice piece for a handful of snaps. I think he's going to be a good player and he's going to be better because this year, but didn't. I mean, why would you play him a whole lot when Mobile's playing the way he is? And Russell's been a pretty good player too in a reduced role, but still good player. But they didn't use a lot of young players there. You're not seeing anything from like the Jacksons in the secondary, and they're not freshmen, but redshirt freshmen, I guess. But you're not seeing that. They just one of the things that Coons did was let's not put the players in the field who we don't know if they can do it, and that's young players. So that was one of the adjustments I think. You had 77, 78 snaps, I think, 79 snaps, and hardly any from younger players, younger defensive backs, younger defensive linemen. They don't really have young linebackers, so not the time or the place right now. Offensively, they haven't used a third running back all year. You're not going to see true freshmen play the offensive line. Wilkins is traveling. That's interesting. Farmer's their only skill guy on offense. Raymond traveled, but he's traveled a couple times and hasn't played. Farmer's their only skill guy. He played 2 snaps. And sure, if they played more than 43 snaps, let's say they played 65, what does he play? 3 snaps? What's interesting with Farmer, though, is that they used him, I think, as a play to try to get him free for a ball, and they threw it to him too. And I think it was that very familiar deep ball they threw to Farmer to start the bowl game to score a touchdown last game against Arizona. They've done that a million times. They ran that, but they put Farmer underneath him to have him go at the seam. And I think that they were like, all right, this is a tape play. Cincinnati's going to see Farmer and they're going to jump him and they're going to leave Farmer. Sorry, Cincinnati's going to see Ray. They're going to recognize that route and they're going to jump him. And then Farmer's going to be open. And it kind of worked, except the deep safety, the ball was just enough that he could kind of get back to it and it wasn't dangerous at all. But they had an idea for Farmer. You don't see the slot go vertical very much. They had an idea for him. And maybe that's his role, is that he's an idea guy. You got something that may work and that's it. But you haven't seen it before. And I don't think the staff is spending time during the season on developing guys for games 9, 10, 11, and 12, especially when the defense is in the shape that it's in. Get your guys who play and play a lot better. Give them snaps and build stuff around them. And offensively, just there's no space for them. There's not. Like, they're not going to use a quarterback. They're not going to use a third running back. They're not going to use offensive linemen. Samarco's playing, and try to maybe get something with Farmer if you can. If not, oh well. What do you do?
The first thought is if you are coaching for your job, whether you are a position
That
coach
too.
or the head coach, are you like, you know what? Let me throw out some kids that have never played before, just to give them a little sprinkle of taste for what
Mhm.
to help them out 2 years down the road. No, you're not doing that. So I do think they tightened up the rotation a bit. I think they tightened it up with veterans. They wanted to focus on guys that they trusted more. Second, there's just not that many decisions to be made as far as red shirts and such goes this time around. Um, Farmer, Jennings, Curtis Jones, Jack Samarco, Keyshawn Robinson, and Clay Ash, the walk-on running back.
Played more
Gone.
than
They're
anybody but Samarco.
yeah, like burned red shirts are gone for them. So they've been gone. Um, gonna have to make a couple choices. I think like Jacob Boyce, the
He's on
defensive
4.
back safety. He's at 4 right now. Is that someone you need to play in the final couple games? Probably not. You're probably seeing the last of him for the rest of the regular season. Linebacker Ricky Williams is at 3, so you'll probably see him for one more game out of these last 3. You know, whenever that is on special teams, most likely. And then defensive lineman Elijah Kinsler. He's at 2. He's at 2 games, so he can play in 2 of the final 3. That's it. So you don't really have these choices that West Virginia has to make or has had to make in past years, and pushing forward with guys or not. Um, it's kind of a lot of guys that, like you said, like are running backs going to play? No. Are offensive linemen going to play? No. Um, this was a senior laden team. We've talked about it before. We've talked about it last week's podcast because we're like, man, a lot of guys are gone after this year. A lot of guys, and it's because there's a lot of seniors. And when you have a lot of seniors coming back, a lot of veterans coming back, there's not a lot of room for these young guys to play. And I think that's the biggest reason why you haven't seen more snaps.
But don't forget, last year they had no choice. They had to play Jaheim White. They had to play Traylon Ray. Like, they had to play some freshmen last year in those spots. You're not seeing it this year. So also, those are good players too. Don't get me wrong. They would play this year. They don't have that, and it's hard to crack through when you have a veteran, I guess, like Jaheim White or Traylon Ray. Like, you're not going to get those guys are there. They're not going anywhere. Boyce is interesting, Chris. I'm trying to see what special teams he's on. Yeah, he played 4 special team snaps. I think he's going to go beyond 4 because he's on a couple of special teams and he's also their third safety. Like, they're not going to play Aiden Tagaloa Nelson or Avery Wilcox. They're not going to play them back there. They haven't yet. But Wilson and Joseph aren't coming off the field. But if one of them loses their helmet for a snap or rolls an ankle or misses a quarter or a game, who are you playing? Like, a guy that you haven't played for a couple weeks because you're trying to preserve his red shirt. I think they're going to go beyond 4 with Boyce and just say college football, man. Make do with it.
As long as it's not a Gary and Howard situation from a few years back, should be good.
Uh,
Multiple times, by the way.
or James Okonkwo or
Yeah. God.
my bad.
Yep. Oopsies.
But that's one to keep to watch on because you're right. Like, honestly, does he need to burn this year just to play, kick off? Like, can you get someone else to cover kicks or whatever he's on? I think it's punt return. I'm not sure. Um, you'd think so. God, they work on it so much and they have 2 deeps and all that. If you want to save it, that's fine. Here's the thing: if he doesn't play Saturday, then he's redshirting. It's not because he got injured or whatever, I would think. If he plays, obviously he's sober, but that's one to watch. That there's not a lot of intrigue. But that's definitely one because I think he's a player of the future. His future could be longer if he doesn't play this year, but is he going to be a 4-year guy? Is anybody going to be a 4-year guy in your program? And if you get really good players, ideally they're gone after 3 years. Oh well.
Well, all right, Mike, I think that's all we got time for now because you have to go get ready to go talk to Neil Brown, assistant coaches, players, etc. Um, and I'm going to get off here and get this up. And then I will start answering the rest of the questions in written format. We'll also take one or two more and do them in 3-minute videos for later in the week. Yes, we took last week off because you guys already had to suffer through my horrible, terrible voice of a cold enough with the podcast. So gave you a little bit of a break there, but we're back this week with a couple more.
Sounds good. Until then, I'm Mike Casaza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.